Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Bryan Kramer. We are back with another H2H chat, which means that it is noon Pacific Standard Time on a Monday, and I hope you're enjoying your Monday. We are really excited to be broadcasting live from IBM Insight. We are here in Las Vegas, all of us on this H2H chat, which ironically, in order for all of us to be on it, we had to be in our hotel rooms to broadcast to you so that we weren't creating these in the background and against each other's microphones. So we are all in the same building, and we are all talking from Las Vegas, which is kind of exciting. So anyway, I'm going to introduce everyone here. Before I move on, I wanted to let you know that today's topic is going to be the future of social business. We are talking about social business as a whole, the past, present, and future. So we'll talk about that. First things first, I want to introduce you to Bernie Borges, right?
Yep, you got it.
All right, and Bernie, he is the Chief Find Officer, Find and Convert and a podcast host, of which I was on his podcast last week, which is kind of fun. I think they'll be coming out here soon. Anyway, Bernie, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So again, Bernie Borges, I'm CEO of Find and Convert. We're a digital marketing agency with serving a B2B client. And as you mentioned, Brian, I'm also the host of the Social Business Engine podcast, which is actually a media property where we do podcasting, we produce videos, and also journals all around social business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to talking with you here more today. And then the next person is, we'll go in order here, the video down at the bottom. Jennifer McClure, she's the keynote speaker, business advisor, and executive coach. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thank you. I work with a company, my own company called Unparalleled Talent, and I primarily do speaking, training, workshops, and coaching with leaders and executives around the world who want to grow their careers and grow their businesses. So I'm excited to be with you here today.
Wow, around the world. I like that part.
Around the world. It's global.
We'll have to get into that a little bit more as we go. And then we've got Dion Hinchcliffe. How are you doing? Chief Strategy Officer, Seven Summits Inc., keynote speaker and author. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good, Brian. Enjoying being here. And yeah, I also a columnist for ZDNet, where I've been kind of telling that social business story for the last 10 years, how it's been unfolding and how brands and companies have been kind of restructuring how they work around all this digital technology. I'm also a co-author of Social Business by Design, where we really summarized 100 use cases. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about where this is all going.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, great. Good to have you all here. For everyone out there, if you are tweeting, if you have been on the tweet chat before, you know to use, the hashtag H2HChat. But if you'd like to add a secondary hashtag this week, because we're live at IBM Summit, you can add hashtag IBM Summit. If you want to use both, that's great. If you feel like you don't need to or want to, that's perfectly fine. We're just trying to help participate at the conference and let them know we're here. So,
would you rather use IBM Insight?
IBM Insight. I do have a little cold, so I can claim a little hashtag deliriousness. Sorry about that. So anyway, hashtag IBM Insight would be great. So everybody out there, please do also tweet us your questions. Susie is taking questions from you guys. So as you have questions, please feel free to pose that here, and she'll be asking those questions on the second half of that. This HA chat. So let's go ahead and move forward. First question here is let's define social business. I know it's been something that's been around a while, but things have changed, and I'd love to hear what your insights are. So Jennifer, why don't we start with you?
Sure. To me, social business is how we use the people that are within our companies in order to accomplish the work. So in the past, it was much more about, isolation. Even if you were physically in the same location, it's only certain people had information, only certain people made the decisions. But in today's world, we can share that information through various channels and get input from employees all over the company and within and outside the company. So that's what social business is to me, is it using tools and technology to be able to access the minds of our people.
Very cool. I love that. I hadn't heard that quite that way before.
Mhm.
And then, Dion, how about yourself?
Sure. So I agree with what Jennifer just said. I think it's about using the connectedness that digital allows us. I mean, for the first time in human history, we're connected to everyone else on the planet, and I think the whole concept of social business is how do you really take advantage of it? What are we going to do with that unprecedented capability? And we looked at, organizations are finally now gone from just kind of using social business as a communications tool and a collaboration tool to really transforming the way that they actually work. And we're now seeing things like management theories like holacracy and hierarchy actually emerging to catch up with what technology has made possible. And so I think it's the future of how we're going to operate our organizations for business purposes and getting very interesting results in a variety of ways. So I think it's an exciting time.
Fantastic, love it. And Bernie, how about yourself?
So I've actually, I love what Dion and Jennifer said, and I've actually put a definition to social business that I've delivered from the stage more than a few times, and it goes something like this. I really believe that a social business is an organization that embraces both the culture and the technology of digital communications, and does so in a way that really empowers the employee to be social both internally and externally, so that they're operating, they're customer facing, everybody's customer facing with one purpose.
Oh, I love it. So unified front, and more unified digitally than ever before. Completely agree. So let me ask you all this question. We've seen digital business. We've seen businesses merge into website or build websites and start to build e-commerce and all of these wonderful digital opportunities. And then along comes social. Now, social has been weaving itself into business now for several years, if not just a few more. And it's changed, it's morphed since we all first started talking about it a few years ago. Where do you think that where do you think companies set it, and where do you think that they still need to work on becoming a social business? Dion, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think that William Gibson said it the best. That future is here, are just very unevenly distributed, right? And so we see some parts of organizations are much more advanced in social. Typically, the marketing department, corp comms, much farther ahead, and other parts of the organization are still trying to come up. And so we're now seeing kind of social business become this top level, even C-suite conversation. So large organizations like Bosch and BASF and others have actually said, no, this is how we're going to run our organizations. And so I think that's a very exciting topic, but I think that organizations don't have a good path forward for how to teach, for example, middle management. There's that famous study that says the vast majority of middle managers are not prepared to do this. And they may even be hollowed out or flattened out by the fact that we can now just all self-organize and communicate with each other. So I think that we have our work cut out to do in terms of learning how to manage our organizations in the social business era.
So managing our business in the social era. What do you think about that, Bernie?
Well, I think too many companies are still focused on social media marketing and not really embracing what it means to be a social business and to harness what it can do for their business when they think about how they can use social for social selling, and I know, Bryan, you like to call it social helping, and I'm good with that. But sales, employee advocacy, harnessing the technology and, again, the culture, it always comes full circle back to that, and getting employees involved so that employees are collaborating with each other internally, so that, again, there's employee advocacy both internally and also externally. Recruiting, using social technologies and social strategies to do recruiting. A lot of companies, really struggle with finding talent, and you can use social strategies to recruit. Customer service, probably in 2015, is probably the number one business function that I've heard of in terms of embracing social, the culture and technology of social. And then last, but certainly not least, is commerce. So when you look at all those different business functions together, any organization that can hit on more than one cylinder, that one cylinder being marketing, if they just think marketing, they're being too narrow in their thinking. That's not social business. That's just social media marketing. If they think broader than that across different business functions, then they can really start to impact their business as a social business.
That's fantastic. How about yourself?
Oh, you cut out. I just heard how about yourself.
Sorry.
So that was to me.
How about you?
Yeah, I think the challenge, that all these things are possible, and as you said, social's been around for a while, but we also have to remember that a good portion of the businesses out there, in fact, the majority of the businesses are small businesses, or not enterprise organizations when we think about social and collaboration. So there's still a challenge out there for the vast majority of employers to really think about how they can use social for all of the things that Bernie mentioned, whether it's recruiting or for customer service, et cetera. And many of them are still in that phase, if they are even considering it, of thinking about how do we control the message. So we only want certain people to be able to share, when that's really not the case. Anybody can share, and they already are sharing out there about your company, whether it's about the employer brand or the recruiting strategy, or what it's like to be a customer or their experience. All of those things are being shared, and we still have many leaders and organizations that are thinking about, we won't let our employees be on social and talk about us, et cetera. So there's still, I think, more of a disconnect than some of us realize that maybe have been involved with social for a long time.
Let's talk about the architecture, the new social team, if you will, or the team that integrates itself to make all this happen. And we're talking in an ideal world, not I realize that some companies can't do everything that we might suggest here. And we have to inch up to being a social business in some cases. But let's talk about the ideal world. In the ideal world, what do you think the architecture of a good social business looks like? And Bernie, why don't you go first this time?
Sure. So I think there's two elements to it, Brian, from an architecture standpoint. There's people, and then there's the technology. So starting first with people, I think you need people who are analytical. And here at IBM Insight, there's a lot of conversation around data and analytics, and some really awesome examples of how it's being harnessed. So analytical, also someone who's kind of community-minded, who can manage communities, and depending on the size of the organization, Jennifer hit on a really key point. Not all the businesses out there are the kinds of big businesses that we see here at IBM Insight. There's more small to mid-sized businesses, and then there are large. There's only 2,000 global 2,000 companies, right? And there's hundreds of thousands of other businesses. So community manager, and then probably some content people, right? And that's from an internal standpoint, from a talent standpoint. From a technology standpoint, you need the ability to do listening. You need the ability to do, of course, analytics. You want the ability to maybe understand who's influential in the marketplace, and you also want some ability to do employee advocacy. So those are kind of some of the key technology components. Most of those are going to be probably mid to large enterprise, but for the smaller business, it's more about some of the more affordable tools that are more kind of social media marketing, monitoring, and listening wrapped up into one. So it just depends on whether it's a 100-person company or a 50,000-person company in terms of which tools I might look at.
Fantastic. And then Dion, what about yourself?
Sure. So yeah, building on top of what Bernie said, we see that most organizations have done social business twice. Usually one's external facing and one internal facing, and they have a lot of duplicate tools and teams. And now a lot of them are meeting in the middle. But it highlights some basic capabilities. Community management is one of the top success factors, one of the top two. The other one being executive support and active executive sponsorship. So community management is one of the most important capabilities in social business, because we really haven't had these large groups of people kind of all connected and wired together around our business purposes that don't actually really report to us. So how do we influence them and guide them? So I think that community management is absolutely essential. And that listening capability someone needs to have their name on that. And that's usually the social media command center, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, which is in most organizations, and I'm sensitive to the point about this isn't all about large companies, is just a virtual console somewhere that listens to the hundreds of channels out there that are talking about your business and your industry and those conversations you have to be involved in. So I think you have the community management piece, you have some form of virtual or real command center to connect it all, and to generate the analytics, the insights that you have. And I don't think you need a full-time data scientist in most organizations. You can rent a data scientist. You can buy it in the tools that you're looking for. I think you can get a lot done. I think if you do that, just those, you're along a lot of the way towards success.
Great. And just again, everyone out there, as you're hearing these things and they're sparking ideas or questions, please make sure that you're definitely using H8Chat, the hashtag, to let us know what other questions you have for us, because in about 15 minutes we're going to be starting to pose those questions back. Susie will pop on and start questioning them, and that's when the second half of the fun begins. So great stuff, Dion. And Jennifer, how about yourself?
Sure, I think Bernie and Dion hit on some key points in terms of architecture, and just one thing to add to that, I do think that it has to be there has to be someone in the organization that's accountable. Certainly executive support, executive buy-in, but having someone be accountable for the social strategy, whether that's encompassing internal, external, et cetera, that's going to force then the data and the analysis and wanting to understand how it connects to the bigger picture. So that's one thing I think I find often is that they're either, if particularly with organizations that maybe are just starting out, no one really owns the strategy, and so having someone that owns that is able to set some measures around it and is looking about how we can use these tools and this technology in order to further our business objectives, I think is critical.
So let's talk about that, business objectives. How do you weave in business objectives that includes social objectives? So give us some examples of some social objectives that that you believe companies could use, that they should take on. Jennifer,
Sure.
you want to just keep going on that, and then I'll run back through the guys.
Yeah, I think certainly from a business objective, you probably have some measures already set around customer experience or customer reactions. So the ability to actually look out into the ether and see what customers are saying is a great way to potentially measure that, or one tool to measure that. From a recruiting and a human resources standpoint, whether that's engagement or whether that's employees that are actively and willingly sharing our brand message, that are helping us to recruit talent. There's a lot of ways that we can look at how we can engage our own employees in both interacting with our customers as well as our employees and other employees and potential employees, I think. Great.
And then, Dion, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think this goes right to the heart of we don't have a lot of good digital KPIs, key performance indicators that we understand how to use. Close a sale. What is our customer satisfaction through traditional channels? And I think if we look at things like social recruiting or social customer care, we can take the KPIs, and when we can just look at channel deflection. Am I doing a lot more hiring out of my social channels, or am I satisfying a lot more customers through my social channels? Those are the basic, I think, KPIs you can look at. And so you can look at how much is being moved into these more efficient, more scalable channels of social business to get things done. So I think that's where you start there. But we also see things like product ideas come flowing into the organization everywhere. You can go out there and harvest them, although most organizations are still in the early stages of doing that, and then tracking them into your innovation pipeline and saying, all right, how many of those have really changed our business? How many of our customer ideas have we realized? So there's a lot of work cut out for us to make these things happen. But I think we start with kind of pave the cow path, map our traditional KPIs into the new ones, and then look for opportunities that only social business can enable, and start tracking those numbers, because you manage to what you measure.
Oh, I love that. We need to tweet. Somebody needs to tweet that. You need to manage to what you measure. Bernie, how about you? What?
That was Peter Drucker. That wasn't me that said that.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. I just caught up the good stuff.
Okay.
Bernie, how about yourself?
So as I mentioned earlier, customer service is a hot application for social, and most companies, in fact, I think all companies that are serious about customer service have a cost that they've associated with every call that comes into the call center, right? $8, $10, whatever that number is. So that's that's a metric that they track. So if having a social care strategy can deflect some of those calls, and they go from 100 calls to 80 calls, and I'm using simple round numbers, they've just saved 20% on that cost, right? So that's one application. Another one is social selling, and again, I know that the social helping thing is
It's all right.
yeah, no, and I love that, by the way. That's why I keep repeating it. But from a social selling standpoint, that is one area where the C-suite can really say, okay, I get that. We've just put more people into an event because our sales team was really active in promoting that event, whether it was a hashtag, whether they were tweeting it, or whatever, they were active on LinkedIn, and we put more people into that event, and then they know from their own metrics that the more people they get into an event, then the more pipeline they can build, and the more pipeline they can build, and obviously the story goes from there from a sales standpoint. So I think social selling and customer care are two kind of low-hanging fruit business functions that organizations should really be looking at for social business.
Fantastic. So we've talked around the architecture. We've talked around some of the areas or the business objectives that they can accomplish, and we've even helped to further define it. Now I'm curious, where do you think it's going to go in the future? What are some of the things that we can look forward to that you think it hasn't accomplished yet, but it will? We just haven't gotten there yet. Is there anything that you think is still coming? Dion, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So one, we've really worked ourselves in an interesting place with our social tools, because it used to be that things like email, you could talk to everyone else with any email client that you wanted, and we haven't gone. We kind of follow the Facebook and Twitter model, and every single social business environment is its own little world, and now we have these thousands of fragmented islands, right? So I can't. If I'm on Facebook, I can't talk to you on other social networks, for example. And the same thing is happening inside our organizations. I recently published a chart that showed that there's a social tool for every single function inside the organization, usually at multiple levels. Like there are social tools for HR, just for the HR people, just for the legal department. It's amazing. There's an entire cottage industry of social tools for law. And it goes on, and none of them talk to each other. So we've kind of really ended up with this place where we have to, there's no one single place to listen. So there's a big push to kind of bring all of that back together, and I think tools like Slack, which kind of reconnect everything together. You have one social place to do everything that you're doing across all your other applications. So I think that's one, social integration. We're kind of bringing all this back together again, because we have too many isolated communities and conversations and networks. I think that's kind of the next phase. It's going to take a while because there's no good standards around it, although the W3C is working on that. So I think that's one big area. And the other one is really situated social business, specific tools to help you do things like supply chain management, things like social customer care, although those tools are finally getting, I think, fairly far along. Things like operations and so on. So I think that things that make sure social is not off to the side, just a conversation, but is how work gets done. And we're seeing a lot of applications. There's no slowdown in the software for all of this. So that's what's been amazing. It's very, very hard to keep track of. So I think those are the two exciting things that we can see.
Did you say Slack earlier? I just want to make sure I understand exactly what you said.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're talking about the chat community chat software?
Yeah, so
Slack, the app.
Yeah, well, you can make an argument that they're a social collaboration tool of a new kind, and one that kind of they have connections to hundreds of different applications. So instead of having to go everywhere to get all your data, you can just chat around and collaborate around all of your applications and all of your data.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's right. All right, good stuff. Jennifer, how about yourself?
Sure, I think it's still, like a lot of things, it's still evolving, and there's, as I said earlier, two different worlds. There's the people who are out here looking at, like we saw at IBM Insight this morning, how Watson and kind of cognitive analytics and cognitive data is informing decision making for how we approach our consumers, and I can see that that's already being used as well as in the recruitment process. But then you've got everybody else who's still trying to figure out how to even use the tools. So, hopefully in the future there'll be kind of a narrowing of that gap, and that the smaller and mid-sized companies will be also figuring out how to use these tools for social collaboration and encouraging. We all do it. Even if you're in the same office location with someone else, you email somebody next door. So how can we, begin to get people collaborating again? rather than kind of informing each other or going back and forth with kind of the static tools of the past. So I think the future, you'll probably see the gap widen before it actually comes together. But the real need is for the smaller and mid-sized companies, I think, to begin to take advantage of some of the tools, free and otherwise, that are out there to help them understand their customers and their employees better.
And Jennifer, I have to say that right behind, off to your right shoulder, is a case with a glass case with, I believe it's Grey Goose, maybe, and
Yes.
it's in a locked case,
and Patron.
and it just keeps calling my name. It's like they put these in all of our rooms, and they put it behind a glass locked case, and they tell you that you can't have it unless you unlock it. It's kind of funny. Sorry, I hate to detract from it, but it's just we have them in all of our rooms. I think it's the funniest thing.
Right.
Talk about selling, right? They're totally selling us up into this this glass case.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, thank you so much. Bernie, how about yourself?
So I've always been fascinated by the enterprise social network. The hashtag on that is ESN, right? And while the adoption rate on enterprise social networks has been growing, it still has been fairly limited to the enterprise. I mean, it's called an enterprise social network, but it seems to be making its way down into the smaller and mid-sized business. And I really would like to see more smaller and mid-sized businesses adopt ESNs, because what it can help them do is really help them become social and get it into the DNA of how they do business each and every day. And if they get it into their DNA by using enterprise social, what's called enterprise social network technology, and they're using it on a day-to-day basis to collaborate and communicate and tweet each other internally, although I'm using the word tweet as I would Kleenex, right? Because it's not really, they're not using Twitter if they're using it within the walls of an ESN. It's just a microblogging function, which is Twitter-like. But if they're doing that internally and being social and engaging and collaborating internally, then it gets into, and I know I've already said this twice, into their DNA, and it really empowers them, and it can accelerate how effective they are in being a social business externally.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Collaboration, both internal and external, bringing those together. I definitely agree. And so you guys are all talking around this idea of collaboration mostly, and where it can go. One final question for each of you guys is the technology. I think Dion, you mentioned or no, I'm sorry, Jennifer, you mentioned the technology this morning with Watson and what we saw. But what do you think? What do you guys think about this idea of one piece of technology doing everything we need versus different pieces of technology doing different things we need in the future? Right now, we don't even have a single dashboard of metrics to look at. I mean, you have to go to, depending upon what you want, you have to go to look at, 2, 3, sometimes up to 5 or even 7 different pieces of software to get what you need. And that's all developed based on the KPIs that you develop yourself. What do you think? Consolidation would help us, or do you think it would hurt in the abstract of understanding how we should grow? What do you all think? Actually, why don't I start with? Hopefully not start with first in a while. Let's see, Bernie. I think. How about yourself?
Sure. I definitely think, and Dion actually said earlier that there's so much technology coming out all the time that it's hard to keep up with it, and I'm glad to hear someone like yourself, Dion, to admit that, because I admit that on a daily basis. It is hard to keep up with it. I really think that it's inevitable that we have to see some convergence, and we're going to start to see more. And I hate to use the word oligopoly, but a smaller number of players who really kind of penetrate an enterprise, a business, with broader and deeper functionality across a lot of silos that exist right now. I rattled off a few earlier: influencer marketing, employee advocacy, listening, analytics, content curation. These are all things that exist as standalone products right now, and I think it's inevitable that we're going to start to see many of those, if not eventually all of them, get wrapped up into more broader enterprise software, even for the small to mid-sized business.
Interesting. I like that idea. Actually, let's go with Jennifer now.
Mhm. I think it's, because we're human, we're always looking to create and innovate. So there will always be new things out there for us to consider. And I think, that's not going to stop in the sense. What I see, and I was at the HR Technology Conference here in Las Vegas last week as well, so saw a lot of, enterprise software and small business software. And what seems to be happening is that more of them are focused on the ability to talk with each other. So we still have a bunch of different vendors or a bunch of different tools, but they're selling and they're offering more of our integration with this tool or integration with that tool. So I don't know, it'd be great if we just had a few to choose from, but my guess is those few will definitely be talking to each other, and that's kind of the way of the future.
Yeah, open APIs. I've been saying it for a long time as well, and I hope that does happen, and that Facebook understands that rule as well. How about you? How about you, Dion?
Well, I think we have these twin forces that kind of have we have this huge wind to our backs and the first force that's really driving us is this technology proliferation. I don't see anyone in most organizations say I need less technology. Most of them say I want more, and there's usually a large backlog. At the same time, everyone wants to own the customer relationship. They want to be the piece of software that you use, that you start with. And so there's a big push towards aggregation. And so I think that, to your point, you have to go to all these tools to get a clear and consistent picture from all the different sources that you need to. Pretty soon another product will come along and say, well, you can just plug all that stuff in and we'll show it to you. But now we own your customer relationship. So I think everyone is trying to climb to the top of the dog pile and own the relationship. That there can only be so many customer touch points that anyone can hit in a day. And so everyone's trying to push up to the top of that, but there's now millions of these applications, literally millions of them, and many are coming inside mobile app stores and in SaaS and the cloud, and they're all competing, trying to climb up that dog pile, and that creates a lot of confusion, a lot of work for us to bring all the pieces together. But I do think we're going to see aggregation platforms continue to emerge, allow us to plug a lot of these individual siloed points of data. As you said, Brian, open APIs is allowing everyone's capabilities, all this software, all this data to be pluggable anyway, right? So that's going to be the big trend. So you look at companies like Salesforce and others are saying, we're trying to create these consistent front ends for all of these solutions in some way that's manageable. And of course, Apple and Android are all trying to do the same thing as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. But we're in the cave painting days. We're still crawling, not even walking, in terms of managing all these channels and these technologies. So it's an exciting time, and it also means there's lots of opportunities still, even for startups now. So I look forward to it.
Well, first and foremost, Jennifer, you said human, and I didn't want to break up the party in the moment because it was a really good thought, but I do want to make sure that we give you the applause. Because we are on H2H chat, and anytime the word human is said, then that's what happens, just so you know. So now, this is the part of the show where I'm going to pass you over to Susie, and she's going to read off some questions from the audience. We've got some great questions. I don't know if you guys have been following, and if not, don't worry about it. But the tweets that are happening are just phenomenal, and we really appreciate it. We've actually got some really good, awesome people on here, like Julie Zisman and Ursula Ringham and Neil Milliken and Aldo Maragoni and J.S. Gilbert and Paul Bradley Smith, Warren Whitlock, Robert Moore, Lee Flowers, and the list goes on. So great people, Mike Bambrick, Mark Britz. I could keep going. So I'm gonna pass the baton over to Susie, who's gonna read some of the questions from all these great people that are taking part here today. Thank you guys for joining me in my segment, and I wish you luck with one of the most challenging questioners I know, Susie McCarthy.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Brian. So I have to say, I've been loving this conversation, and I've been looking forward to this chat for a while, ever since we were putting together the panel, because you guys are just such experts and coming from different perspectives as well. And definitely within the conversation stream, I mean, this is generating some really great questions. So I'm going to start kind of at some of the higher level questions that we've been going back and forth on, some of these concepts that have begun, and towards the second part, we're going to get more into kind of some of the practical questions. We have had some questions about tools, etc. So I want to kick it off by a really great comment that Mark Britz has actually said on the chat that has been generating a back and forth for about the past 10 minutes that I've been loving to see. He said, it would seem to me the smaller businesses get social inside and out better than the larger ones. That's his thought, and we've had, once again, back and forth on the Twitter stream, and so I want to go ahead and bring this to the panel and, get your take. Jennifer, he actually tagged you in the post directly, so I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. I think, as a consultant, I've got to give the classic answer, it depends, Certainly, I think, the ability to be more nimble and to really implement and have somebody that is cheerleading it and make sure that your organization can do it. I've seen many small companies do it and do it well, but many are still in the dark ages. If you're in a larger organization, the world gets smaller and you just basically have to do what you need to do to compete. Somebody else implements the technology, you have to follow along. So I will agree to disagree with that comment, but I will say that certainly I will agree in principle that many of them do as well.
Right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Dion, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the thing is, large companies tend to have the resources to invest in dedicated teams who can do this really well.
Yes.
And if you look at the Forrester data, shows that there is this big spike at the very small end, or really small companies that don't have to make a lot of decisions, and they desperately need to use every tool to catch up. They're very good at social. So we're talking like 5 or 10 person companies tend to be incredibly good. But I've noticed there's this big hollowing out in the middle. Medium-sized companies don't have enough resources to invest. They're already trying desperately to survive their growth cycle. And they aren't able to activate, and the data shows this, right? So it's kind of like this bell curve effect. Really large companies, I've seen social teams 50 or more people in some of these large organizations with more than 200,000 employees. And then we see at the bottom end, these really nimble companies are really scrappy, trying to use every single asset they have, and social is the most powerful tool that's available to them and the lowest cost.
I love that. That's absolutely fascinating. And I have to say, a 50-person team is making me slightly drool at the moment. But yeah.
Exactly.
So Bernie, your thoughts?
So I respectfully disagree with the generalization that smaller businesses would find it easier. A couple of reasons. Dion just hit on one of them, and that is bigger companies have more resources. They can assemble a team. They can simply apply more people and resources to it. But the other one is absolutely non-negotiable that the leader, the CEO or the owner of that business really embrace social, and not just embrace it, but that he or she also has the ability to sell it to the team. Because I've actually seen it through our own client implementations where the business owner says, we need to do this, team, we're on board, we're going to become a social business, but nobody below the CEO buys in.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, it goes nowhere. And
Yeah.
it's harder in a smaller company because everybody's stretched thin, working really hard, sometimes doing 1.5 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I don't think that's a generalization that I can sign up for.
I love that you brought up the leadership component, because that always, I feel like, is so incredibly important. And actually, playing into this, I want to bring up a question that Tim Sackett actually mentioned. So what he wants to know is, what do we do with a backlash that may happen from employees getting fatigued that their organizations are constantly maybe trying to try, the latest and greatest network to try and be this thing called social? How do you deal with that? Where are we? What should we be worried about? How does that work? Jennifer, maybe I'll start with you again, since you're the HR guru here on the chat.
On the chat. And shout out to Tim Sackett. So thanks for following along.
I'm going to say. Everybody, right?
I think, it's like everything else. It can't be the program of the month. And I go back to, you have to have somebody in the organization that is ultimately with being responsible and accountable, so that, yeah, there may be, people on their team that are trying tools, or they may try some tools, but ultimately they make a decision about, here's where we're headed as an organization, and this is the tool or the tools that we're going to use. So, kind of having the Wild West of, we're going to try them all, we're going to use them all, absolutely, then you'll have such dilution that it's not going to be effective as well. So having somebody that owns it, having somebody that shares and trains and gives good examples about how we can use it, I think that's the way to go. But I can see where Tim's kind of headed, that as something new comes up every day, there will always be something new. So that will be a challenge for us going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I want to pose a little bit of, unless Bernie, Dion, did you want to speak to that?
I just want to add.
Yes.
The World Economic Forum just noted that in the next 20 years we're going to undergo more change than the last 300 years, right?
Holy cow!
So this is why leadership really becomes so important, because we are going to have to change what we do, how we work, and how we communicate much more rapidly than we ever have in the past. And we want that change to be natural and organic as much as possible, of course. But I do think leadership has to have clarity, saying we're going to do this for a while, something else is going to come along, the world's going to change faster, and we have to change along with it. We have to move with our customers. And so I do think there's expectation that workers need to be lifelong learners, need to adapt to new tools more readily, learn faster. I think that's just reality.
Bernie, anything to add there?
Quickly, the backlash thing to me sounds like a flawed strategy.
Yeah.
You have to have a strategy, and earlier I talked about customer service. So if your strategy is, we're going to focus on customer service, and for the next year that's our strategy, then you're focused on that. That's your strategy. And I'm just using that as an example, but the question really, to me, is symptomatic of a flawed strategy.
Yeah. No, I can. And actually, someone responded to that question of Tim's and said, sounds to me like that company brand isn't necessarily social, which actually brings me to another really kind of interesting question that's generated some discussion from YPro Digital, the handle, who's just awesome. The person operating that handle is always great. Who wants to know, for you guys, should we be moving beyond this term social when we're talking about a social biz? Perhaps, do we want to move to the term digital? Does this matter? Is this something we should actually be thinking about? Is this just terminology? What are our thoughts?
I still think there's legs in social yet, because there's still things that are what we would call non-social, where things aren't shared by default. You can't find the conversation on your internal network or open on the internet. There's a lot of private stuff that isn't really social that still happens. That being said, I do think, we see social embedded in almost everything that we do now in terms of the actual features, right? So everything's got a Facebook and Twitter integration, it seems like now.
Right.
So I still think there's some utility in the term to separate it from the legacy things, but I think at some point it won't make any more sense because everything will be social pretty soon.
Right, right. I think that was part of the point there. But I agree.
And I think, in terms of, though, social does scare off, I think, some executives and some leaders. We don't want our employees, tweeting what they had for lunch, which is still, how some people describe social. So for me, it's always been about, if I'm working with leaders to, both sell or implement a strategy in their organization, it really is about communication. So, whether it's email, whether it's, smoke signals, whatever, we have to have a communication strategy in our organization. And today, the technology allows us to do these through some of these collaboration tools and online sharing tools. And if we call it social, sometimes the business context has trouble with that. So for me, it's about communication.
I like that. I really like that. I may steal some of that, actually, in future conversations. I love that interpretation. Bernie, your thoughts. Tell me.
I'm with Jennifer. I'm going to give you an interesting perspective, because I own a media property that's titled Social Business Engine.
Yes.
But that said, I prefer digital communications. And now I'd have to rename my media property to actually go there. But the reason is because everything that we're talking about really is digital communication. In fact, I even frame it up in either presentations or with clients that we really want to strive to become a digitally mature organization. In other words, the way that we operate, the way that we communicate, we need to be mature in the way that we use digital communication techniques and strategies. So, for example, text messaging. I mean, it's very commonplace. That's one way for people to communicate with each other, as well as for brands to actually communicate with their customers. Is that social? I don't know. I'm not going to argue that it is or it isn't. It's more digital. And then Jennifer also just hit on a key point that I see every day, and that is a lot of times when you use the word social in a C-suite, it's an immediate turnoff.
Yeah.
When you explain the concept of here's how we're communicating to the world, and much of it is digital, you get heads nodding. They understand that.
Yeah.
But many times the C-suite does not understand social.
Yeah, and I think that's their downfall. I mean, they're not living in the present. And the challenge you have is that if you tell that I've had is if I say, well, you should be engaging in digital communications, they go, we've been doing that for 20 years. We've had a website since 1995.
Right.
We issue all of our press releases out over the internet. And so I think there's, how do we separate? We've learned a lot in 20 years, and a lot of that's reflected in the latest capabilities around things like social and big data and so on, where we can take advantage of it, and they offer unique, scalable, cost-effective value in a way that the old traditional methods just don't deliver. So how do we? I think this is something we haven't successfully worked through, is communicate whether you're doing the new stuff or the old stuff, and the word digital can mean either one at this point because we've been doing it for 25 years.
Right. So funnily enough, my next question, and this should be good, is from Suzanne. So she says, why do the experts think some executives are not totally buying into the importance of social? So my panel of experts, tell me why, Jennifer, you didn't speak to this specifically, so I want to know, but Dion, Bernie, why do you guys think that some executives are not totally buying into the importance of social? And Jennifer, do you think that executives are not totally buying into the importance of social?
Okay. Well, I'll go first since maybe I was the one that said that. Do I think that? Yes, because I deal with them every day. They are out there, and it's not just the small company C-level. Now, so it's like generalizing human resources or recruiters or, marketers as a certain way. We're not generalizing the C-suite in general doesn't get social or social media, but I see it every day. They're just, and many of those, I was at a large global corporation last week where the CEO totally didn't get trust and respect for coworkers, so right. there are plenty of them out there that are holding their organizations back because of their own personal views or they're not getting out and investigating what their competition's doing to stay ahead. They're there.
Yeah. Dion, Bernie, would you basically echo that?
Well, I think that you see that there's now a big spread in the leadership field in most organizations. That the leaders and the laggards are farther apart than they ever have been, because some executives have kept up on the story and are trying to push as far forward as they can. So I think more now than ever before, you do run into to leaders, high-level leaders, that say, no, digital is our future. Social is a big component of that,
right,
along with other things. And I need to know. I may not know why that's the case, but I definitely see the writing on the wall. I want to drive forward my organization. And then there are people who are still literally seem to be living in the dark ages in the in the 1990s. But I think the spread between them is now greater than ever. And the data has shown us. A lot of people say, well, is there? Do you have executives that are more advanced in this space mean the organization will do better? Well, there's now been a large number of studies looking at even the profitability and the revenue of companies that have a lot of digital leadership versus those that don't. And there's a definite. MIT did a fantastic study 2 years ago that showed there's a big difference between the digital leaders and the digital laggards. So I think the impact is there, but it's going to take 10 or 20 years for organizations to shake out the executives that don't understand digital. But increasingly, it's going to be very hard for them to survive, if you ask me.
So then Bernie, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, what I would add is that the reason, if you go back to the question, why? What is the reason that so many in the C-suite don't embrace social? And that is that I believe that they insulate themselves. They don't allow themselves to integrate and engage with the people within their organization that are digitally mature, that are active in using social in productive ways. They literally don't see it. They don't allow themselves to see it, and they have some preconceived perceptions that are, I don't want to tweet what I had for lunch, which is, at this point, 10 years old. So because they insulate themselves and they simply just don't allow themselves to see what's possible, I agree with Dion. I think they're going to be, disrupted or out of business. I heard a stat the other day. I think in 2000, the Fortune 500 list, 52% of the companies on the Fortune 500 list in 2000 are no longer there.
Wow.
And I think that the reason I bring that up is I think businesses that simply don't understand the impact can be impacted that way, whether they're on the Fortune 500 list or not. It's like, well, what's the equivalent of that to them? Where are they today where they might not be 5 or 10 years from now if they don't embrace what I'll call being digitally mature? I know we're here talking about social business, but since we brought up the alternative, I'll throw it.
So then, sorry, Dion, please.
No, I was just going to say and what's interesting is that same data set about most of the S&P 500 companies some 15 years ago are no longer with us. What's the reason behind that? So Standard & Poor's and MIT came together and said, well, what is the reason that companies like Barnes & Nobles and Blockbuster and Nokia and all of these companies, Kodak, all went out of business or were acquired and those acquisitions didn't go very well? The primary reason is unable to adapt to technology conditions, and so that's very interesting. So from that standpoint, I think that we see that digital and even social has now entered the C-suite in a big way. We haven't before. I was 3 years ago. I didn't talk to that many CIOs, CMOs, and CEOs. Now that's primarily mostly who I talk with. I do think the conversation's getting up there, but I think that there's this empty quarter. Older executives with less technology skills, data show, are much less likely to do that. To try and push your organization forward because they don't know how to lead. So I think that's one of the biggest issues holding organizations back from digital and social.
So then my question, I like that a lot. So then, obviously people, I think at this point I'm very tired of the term millennial, right, or multi-generational, all of that stuff. But I do want to put it out there. If we are talking about, it sounds a little bit to me like we are talking about another generation moving into the ranks. Do you think this is generationally correlated? As we see a generation moving forward, do you think then we're going to have more adoption, or is this more the constraints of potentially the legacy corporation itself that needs to change structurally?
I'm like you. I tire of the generational conversation. I think we've always had generations in the workplace. So
right?
I don't know why it's all of a sudden, become a big thing in the last 10 years or so. But, there is, I think, some validity to saying that we have these digital natives that are coming into the workplace that use technology for everything. So that's going to, by nature, I think, change the way that technology is viewed. Where I see people that are typically resistant of digital or are using social for, their business, it's often more about control. So that I have, a client who's a fairly young CEO, but it's a privately held company, and he just really bristles at the idea of losing control. So that is not necessarily a generational issue. It's a management style and approach. So we're going to see it, just become, because it's the way of life for, those that are in their teens and 20s and early 30s. They've always had technology, so they're going to be looking for technology solutions. But I don't know that, I wouldn't consider myself a millennial, but I'm just wired because that's how I do business now. Is I'm always looking for technology solutions. So some of it's generational, some of it's not.
Well, and I like to call myself a 45-year-old millennial. I think it's a mindset more than it is an age necessarily. And I do think there is a generation forming beyond the millennials, and they do have a very different habits in using digital and social. In fact, there's kind of this backlash against how open everything has been, and the fact they've been monitored 24/7 for most of their lives. And so we see things like Snapchat and WeChat, and all these new types of tools, often which we don't know anything about. That they're using, and so but I think even that we can look at that as more of a mindset than it is necessarily an age. But Gen Z or whatever we're going to call that next generation, it's coming and it's going to be different. We're still learning about it.
Yeah, no, I'm a millennial, right? But that's the generation behind me, or whatever we're going to call them. That's kind of blows me away. Facebook started when I was in college, and so my
Yeah,
adult life,
right.
for them.
That's for old people. Facebook's for old people, right?
Right.
From their point of view.
I know, right? Okay, Bernie.
So yeah, so Jennifer had me fooled, by the way. I thought for sure she was a millennial, but so I absolutely do think it is a generational thing. I'm not tired of talking about it because it's reality. Why deny reality? And it is a mindset thing, but the mindset happens because more people in the C-suite are not millennials. So I have a pretty simple solution for this, and I didn't make this up, so I'm not going to say this is my brilliant idea. I've seen this implemented, but not enough. I just think it needs to be implemented a lot more to see a lot more progress on this. And I'll give you a clear example. They were actually on my podcast. Deloitte, who's a global technology consulting and accountancy organization, very conservative by their very nature of what they do, and also by the nature, the complexity of their offering. Most of the people that are senior in their organization are not millennials. They're over 40. Right. So what they have been doing now for at least a year, if not more, if they've been pairing up senior level people with really smart, productive millennials within the organization. And what they do is they pair them up in kind of like a buddy system, and they have a structured approach where these pairs get together with some frequency and with a plan and topics, and it's a mentoring program, and it's a two-way mentoring because the senior person can certainly do some mentoring to the millennial, and then vice versa, the millennial can do some mentoring to the senior person on how to engage, what does it really mean, et cetera, et cetera. I think more organizations should be doing that, and I think we'd see a lot more progress a lot faster.
Yeah, the reverse mentoring, I think it's a big trend, and most leaders say that they're open to it. And when I started seeing like really conservative organizations like Bayer, the German pharmaceutical company, they started having these very serious German executives start to rub shoulders with all these young German technophiles in hoodies, right? So that's starting to happen, and they're reporting great success, that they really start to think differently, looking at how these young people actually live their lives in the digital world. That's a great point, Bernie.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I would like to go ahead and do our wrap-up question, and I always like to end on a so what, right? Next steps note. And Mike Haberman kindly provided me an excellent one for this week. He wants to know, what advice would you give to a small company that wants to start social business, right, or implementing this type of social business? What is the first thing, number one thing that they should do?
I would say that work out loud, both externally and internally, right? Narrating your work. I mean, that's the first core principle. Talk about what you're doing, who you are, what you think, and build your social capital around you. But that seems to be the core principle of getting started.
I like that. I like that a lot. I feel like I need a T-shirt. Work out loud. Jennifer.
I think that's a great question. I'd have to think about that, and again, it would depend on the organization. But certainly getting people engaged. Where are they already participating? How can we take advantage of our employees and our customers who are already out there using social tools and collaboration tools and digital tools to either talk about our products or talk about our companies? So whether that's starting with kind of a listening strategy and seeing, what's the conversation already out there and how can we join in on it and maybe steer it in a certain direction or continue to amplify what's being said about us. So that's probably what I would say first, is to start kind of with what's being said already. Where are the people that are fond of your products or your services engaging? And so it's not that everybody needs to start on Facebook or Twitter. It's we need to figure out where our customers and our employees are.
I love that. I love that so much. That's, for me, with social strategy, that's first step, right? It's finding that, and I love the idea that that's where we would move as a social biz. Bernie, last but not least.
So I look at it through the lens of a digital agency because that's the world that I live in, and the first thing that we do is we do research, and the research is done at several levels. It starts with the customer. We do a deep dive on really understanding the customer. Who are they? What are the personas in the customer? And what are the kinds of things they care about? What are the kinds of content that they resonate to? Where do they spend their time on social? And then do the same thing with your competition. Look at the competition and see if you can learn from the competition. What are they doing? Doesn't mean that because they're doing something, by the way, that you should go do that. But nonetheless, you should research it, study it, and then look internally as well. You know, who do we have internally? What's our approach today with our internal team? Are they socially active at all? So you have to kind of bring all those together and then do a little bit of dust settling on all of that, and then map out a plan that is not a plan that's trying to conquer the world overnight. You know, pick a business function. I spoke to this earlier, right? Pick a business function and focus on that one business function. And so maybe it is more marketing, or maybe it is more around selling if you're B2B, or maybe it is around, you know, customer service, whatever that business function is. But first, study your customers, study your competition, study the employees to understand to what extent they're social, and then pick a business function to focus on, and then roll that out slowly and methodically, and then just look at it once a month. Just, you know, do your reviews once a month and see what's working, what's not working, and see if you need to go left or right or keep going.
I love it. So I asked for one thing. You gave me one strategy, but I love the theme. You gave me one that, and I think that's great. I gonna touch base with Mike afterwards and find out what do you think, right? So thank you guys so much. Seriously, fabulous panel. Blew my mind beyond my expectations. Thanks to our amazing community. You guys had awesome questions. And to my panelists, I want to let you know that this is about a fraction of the questions that are out there. There's tons of stuff on the H2H hashtag. So if you get a chance to take a look, engage with our community, they would love it. Yes, we have. Yes, Bernie's lower third didn't work properly, so that is mine. Bernie, we'll tweet it out. So thank you so much to our sponsor, IBM, both for sponsoring this, chat, but also hosting us right now at IBM Insight. So you can follow all 4 of us, 5 of us with Bryan, as well as we embark on more of the day at IBM Insight. And otherwise, I will see you all on my community next week. H2H chat, same time, same place.
Bye-bye.
It's been awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.